the these two things, one country and two systems. If you see them as the contradicted to each other, then you will get a totally different conclusion. But in fact, one country and two systems, are dialectically unified. So without one country, we can see what happened in 2019. Or when the one country get weakenized, you can see what happened in 2019 and some other political turmoils before that. Now the reform plus the national security law, we can finally have a very ideal condition for the city and for the officials, for the politicians, for the people in the city to seek the solution for the many other, the real problems that makes the city, makes the people worried, such as the housing problems, such as the education, media. In the past, you can see in the legislative council, you can see filibuster every week, every month. When you're trying to solve the real problems, some politicians in the opposition camp, they just block or against everything proposed by the pro-establishment camp or the government. So I think it's just what I said. It's a good news.
So Einar, step back a little bit and really let's talk about with democracy. Many describe the protesters in Hong Kong as pro-democracy protesters, and then they're calling this legislative change by Beijing as a violation of democracy in Hong Kong. Their underlining message is democracy is a great thing, is a panacea to many, if not most, of Hong Kong's problems.
Well, if Hong Kong had been democratic, totally electing their own officials, one day after the protests, it would not have changed the fact that Hong Kong, the majority of Hong Kong, is controlled by a very tight group of elite families who have been holding the land basically for for their own economic goods. In essence, they have allowed the people to suffer while they have prospered. That would not have changed. Nothing would have changed, except Hong Kong would have lost its ability to deal with the mainland. And in that case, where would they be? Hong Kong, its whole prosperity, to the extent it has enjoyed it, has been linked to the mainland. You can see quite clearly how they have prospered. Unfortunately, it was very, very uneven. So stepping back, democracy is not the issue. The issue is what are you doing for the people? And unfortunately, all the people that my colleague was mentioning, they were trying to basically, make Hong Kong independent without a plan, not unlike what was happening in Spain.
Yeah. Many scholars argue that the ability of governance is actually more important than the form of government these days. Yang-Sheng, your last thoughts and reflections on these legislative changes and really Hong Kong's future and this link with the Chinese mainland?
My last thought about reform is what you're asking. Okay. For the people in Hong Kong, I believe those people who love Hong Kong, who believe they're Chinese, who love the country, they don't need to be afraid anymore. In the past, I was in Hong Kong in 2019 during the political turmoil. I have seen a lot of horrible things, including my colleague, Mr. Fu Guohao, he got attacked at the airport of the Hong Kong International Airport, and the people like him, and also other the mainland immigrants in the city, and also other many Hong Kong people who really patriotic, who disagree with those separatists or the opposition camp politicians or the Western so-called universal values. They don't need to be afraid anymore. They can now elect the people that they trust, or they will be encouraged to contribute their thoughts, their talents to the governance of the city to solve the problem for the people. So I'm truly glad to see such thing happen in 2 years after the turmoil. At that time, I was like my colleagues and me and many people around me was like waiting for this moment.
Really, we're hoping and praying for the best of Hong Kong. Thank you so much, Yang-Sheng, and thank you as always, Einar, for joining us. We'll take a short break, and when we come back, the just concluded 2 sessions highlighted the people-centered development. as a key element to safeguarding human rights in China. Can China share this approach with the rest of the world?
Find the Beijing Hour on social media. Talk to us on Twitter at the Beijing Hour or on Facebook at the Beijing Hour Official.
China has highlighted people-centered, high-quality development as Chinese President Xi Jinping encouraged this concept to improve people's livelihoods. What kind of people-centered development is China pursuing? How does it reflect democracy with Chinese characteristics? Joining me today from Memphis in the U.S. is Professor Joseph Mahoney at East China Normal University, and from Beijing, Professor
I would love to know what that means.
Senior Research Fellow at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. Welcome to both of you. Joseph, let me go to you first. We've heard this too often and too many times that the two sessions are China's rubber stamp parliament and a political political body, CPPCC, that is largely symbolic. Your thoughts on these Western characterizations?
I think we have to start with the very different concept of democracy that has emerged in China over the years as these two institutions themselves have emerged and begun to function as the two sessions together. The main goal in China throughout the course of modernity is to establish itself as a strong nation, and we hear this in terms of the rhetoric of national rejuvenation. And to do this, to advance it for the good of the masses, this has required a certain amount of political discipline that minimizes some aspects of democracy, but maximizes others. And I think that this is where we see the NPC and the CPPCC functioning together. With the CPPCC, you draw in expertise from all walks of life across China who can consult with and advise the national legislature as the NPC meets to establish the legal agenda, the new laws for the country for that year.
Now, Professor He, how would you explain the two sessions and this year's sessions in particular to the global audience?
Well, two sessions is a typical style of China's democracy with Chinese characteristics. We have been always saying democracy cannot be understood as some fixed model, saying only the election can be called democracy. Actually, now we have seen clearly there is something wrong also in terms of those Americans' democracy and also some European countries. They are also facing some difficulties. So no single model right now can be said is a perfect one. So it needs to develop itself. So why not some other country like China and Russia and even some African countries and Asian countries, they develop their own style of those democracy. So I think like two sessions itself proved clearly now all those like deputies and also those like CPPCC, those people, they have prepared very well with their proposals regarding to their own background. Those proposals has based on whole year those very deep those investigations to consult with people and also to check around and talk with people on the ground. So it's coming from the root area, from the grassroots people. So it's not saying just fighting with each other like opposition party with ruling party or those congressmen fighting with each other there in those parliament. So we have a different way, but all in all, because people, when we talk about people-centered, so you need to regard, put the people at the first. For example, last year, this pandemic, was very serious in Wuhan, and then all the country, we put, people's life first, and other things, you have to step back. So this is I think, the true meaning for democracy.
Well, Joseph, do you agree? I mean, obviously the Chinese and Western scholars have different interpretations of what human rights entail. In the West, people talk about, in the US in particular, people talk about the right to protest, to assemble, to speak up against power, and to vote, of course. But in China, Beijing argues that the right should also include the right to food, shelter, health, security, and safety. Can the two sides ever come together and reconcile with their differences?
Well, I think it comes down to 2 or 3 issues. The first is it's good to have ideals. It's good to move towards those ideals. But if those ideals don't actually perform, and it actually leads people into danger or into a backward situation, that can hardly be said to be normatively democratic.
Tell us communism doesn't work. It's able to tell us
Chinese system wants to make. I think we have to acknowledge that both the Western tradition and the Chinese tradition have a profound positive regard for humanity, for the human experience. They do have some traditional differences, but most of the differences that we see in the modern period come from the different experiences that China and the West have had. And in large measure, we should recognize that some of the aspects that the West criticizes in China were actually instigated by Western aggression. This need to create a strong nation and to resist foreign meddling in order to protect not only the greater good, but to simply survive. It was, China was facing existential challenges from external forces, the century of humiliation, and we're only really seeing China emerge in the last 20 to 30 years from that dark period, and of course there's still some vulnerabilities. So I think along the way, of course, China has discovered, as it's had to deal with these challenges and to survive these dangers from the West, it's not only rejected the West, it thinks it's come to a different solution, a different path altogether, and it's committing itself to that, particularly given the success it's had in the last few decades, and underscored again by its capacity to resolve the crises associated with COVID.
Right, Professor Ho, let me go back to you. During the 14th five-year plan that is deliberated this time around, a key concept was emphasized. That was people-centered, high-quality development. How does this concept trickle down to average citizens like you and me?
Well, I think this high quality development not only mentioned to economic those development different form. If you look carefully, before we just talk about economic, those high quality development. Now it goes to everywhere, every aspect in our social life, including like you and me, our daily life. So which means very detailed. For example, before maybe you just get rid of breakfast and rush to your office, right? Because the time constraint. But now you need to also focus on those daily life quality. Maybe you should have a very good arrangement about your time. Yeah, this is all the things come from all the aspects of your life. Not only even for the job, for your research work, like my work, I also need to have a very good arrangement about what time, how many days, how many hours a day, and maybe how many hours others to do like physical training, whatever. So I just go to talk about myself, and also talk about all the people in our country. Now we have already made clear, even last year, saying now our main, the contradiction in our social life, that is this demanding, the increasing demand for the life and for the people, and with this uneven and not balanced economic development. So which means our economic development, its goal is to meet people's increasing demand. So that's the people-centered. It's not saying to focus on GDP, how far it is. Before, we just focus on the speed of the GDP. But now we no longer chase for this high speed. We chase for this high quality, anti-pollution, how to reach this carbon those goals. So all of that, environmental and people's life, all this living in the harmony, this kind of situation, that's the goal we need to chase.
Well, Joseph, do you look at that way too? I mean, you lived and taught in China for quite a while, and how do you look at the situations on the ground? For example, China proposes such concepts as no one should be left behind, the people first, life first. Do they constitute democracy as China defines it?
I think that what they aim for is a certain type of social justice, and I think that I think we get hung up on this word democracy and democracy in a particular form. But what we really have to look back at is are we creating a system of governance that's actually alleviating human suffering, promoting human progress, and leading to social justice? I think one of the things that because I lived in Beijing and then I lived in Shanghai and technically still do, I think one of the things that all of us are very aware of is how much the environment has improved in both cities over the last 10 years and even the last 5 years. And this really directly traces to new standards for assessing leaders, a new development model, a shift in perspective at the highest level. And it's really responding to a public cry from the people themselves for cleaner air, cleaner water, a cleaner life. And so I think this is one example. It's a powerful example, and it tracks with human progress globally.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much. Joseph Mahoney joining us from Memphis, Tennessee, and Professor He Weiping from Chinese Academy of Social Sciences.
Want more in-depth reports and behind-the-scenes stories from the Beijing Hour? Follow us on Twitter at Beijing Hour or on Facebook at the Beijing Hour Official.
With that, we come to the end of this edition of The Point. As always, follow us on Facebook and Twitter using the handle Liuxin in Beijing. On behalf of the team, thank you for watching.
Right now, under southbound at the moment from the 680 traffic center. Actually, should mention the north and southbound Keel, north of Wilson. The construction setup, it's really slow southbound from Tavistock and northbound from the 401. From the 680 traffic center, here's Christine Lagos.
On the eastbound 401, we have delays approaching Winston Churchill to east of the road, east of the 427 to the 400 ramps. Problems east of the 400 collectors have cleared. It's heavy approaching the Allen to Leslie, alternately express and collectors, and slow from above Gordon in the collectors over to Kennedy. Westbound 401 is still busy from Brock Street to west of the 412, approaching Markham Road in the collectors and McAllen in the express across to Young. It's slow from Kiel to approaching the 400 express and collectors, approaching Mavis to approaching Mississauga Road. On the eastbound QE Gardner, it's heavy from Third Line to Ford Drive and from the Humber Bridge to Parkside. Get your best night's rest on the supremely comfortable Casper 6-inch mattress and Casper pillow, available at TSC. Get them tomorrow and save big. Shop tsc.ca. Your next report is at 6:41. Now the forecast. Here's Natasha Ramsahai.
Sunny conditions returning tomorrow. Now we do have the wind still in place up to about 50 to 60 kilometers per hour this evening, easing overnight, waking up to wind chills of -12, and with that sun tomorrow up to a high of 7 degrees. Tonight we're down to that low of -6, wind chill -12. It is currently 1 degree in Pearson.
Thank you. This is 680 News.
The Ford government has unveiled changes to capacity limits for weddings and funerals in gray lockdown zones. The announcement comes as the province reports nearly 1,400 new cases of COVID-19, 40% of which are currently new variants.
680's Phil Martino joins us live with what you need to know.
Well, they're all
James, Toronto and Peel remain in gray, but you can walk down the aisle and have a small reception thanks to the adjusted capacity limits. As of Monday, weddings, funerals, and religious services, rites, or ceremonies in gray lockdown will be permitted to allow for up to 15% total occupancy indoors or up to 50 people outdoors. Nick DiDonato, president and CEO of Liberty Entertainment Group, which operates numerous restaurants and event facilities in Toronto, including the Liberty Grand, says any step forward is appreciated and respected, but he says he thinks the province could have done more with respect to having events.
It's not helping venues very much at all, other than helping the people who want to have their weddings and who want to celebrate their vows. But it's not for actual events inside spaces.
Purely because it stopped 10 in a row. We talked about this before, so Celtic went to that and didn't manage to get it, but it's made football in Scotland more competitive again, which has scarcely been for a decade. Celtic were so far ahead in the league for so long, and in all the cups as well, the vast majority of the cups. And I'm going to the Celtic versus Rangers game in just over a week's time, and I can't believe in the space of one.
Why he didn't make sure to get to the bottom of things. Every question the minister was asked was met with anger, frustration, or he did this. He twisted it into an attack on his service in the military.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair. Please don't have this member to define my experience in the Canadian Armed Forces or what it was like, because I would not do it for what happened in your life either, okay? I'm sorry. I've had many people, many white men trying to tell me what my experience is. And right now I want to talk about the women and what better we can do for them. So please don't do that, Mr. Garrison, to me.
Well, Mr. Minister, I said nothing about your honorable service in the Canadian Forces. Nothing whatsoever. What I'm asking about today,
you said that I was hiding something because of service. Please don't do that. Because don't define my experience in the Canadian Armed Forces.
Of service.
You have no idea what my life was in the Canadian Armed Forces. Thank you.
Good God. I'm sorry, like what was that? Many white people have told him about his experience during his time in service. That had nothing to do with the question. The question was, and I went back and I listened to it.
Don't tell us. Play it. Don't tell us. Play
about
it.
the allegations brought to him in 2018 by the military ombudsman, and he turned that into an attack on his time in service. And you know, clearly, he has his own experience, and no one should tell him what that experience was, you white people. I mean, he's the defense minister, and today he was acting like a clown in a clown show, huffing and puffing and trying to avoid answering any questions, you know, as to why he didn't make sure that a complaint by a female officer was properly investigated. He was like that guy, what's his name, Sergeant Schultz. You know, he's nothing, he knows nothing, he wasn't even there.
Politicians inserting themselves into an investigation is wrong. At the very end of this private conversation, Mr. Walburn brought up concerns of misconduct involving the former Chief of Defense Staff. He did not give me any details. I did not allow him to give me any details. I very purposely respected the investigative process to ensure that it remained independent.
That's rich. I laughed at that. I was drinking my water and I spit that one out. I mean, you're talking about a government that had zero issue involving itself to try to get the buddies out of trouble over at SMC. I mean, give me a break. The military ombudsman earlier this week clearly testified he was not asking Minister Sagen to get involved in an investigation. What he was asking for was for advice on how he should handle a complaint that had come forward by a female officer. And what we got today was this temper tantrum. Maybe that's what it was, you know? And this is a minister who is known to have a very close relationship with retired General Vance. They served together in Afghanistan. And from the outside looking in, watching what I saw today, if Mr. Sagen thought that he cleared things up, I think that performance raised a whole lot more questions.
Because we're animals in a zoo.
The Premier has apologized to MPP Sol Mamakwa. And it was all about this question, which I thought was foolish, but it was about this question that the MPP had asked about getting vaccines in the First Nations, and this is what the Premier had said.
That was one of our highest priorities, to go into the 31 flying communities. Not only did Orange fly in, but the member flew in too to get his vaccine. So thank you for doing that and kind of jumping the line, as I talked to a few chiefs that were pretty upset about that. Or flying into a community that he doesn't belong, but that's here or there.
All right, so late this afternoon, Premier Ford has apologized, which, you know, is the right thing to do. I mean, if someone came forward, one of the chiefs, and there are many, many chiefs, there's not just one. I mean, there are lots of First Nation chiefs, and it could very well have had someone come forward and say something to the Premier. But, you know, we can't show the work, then you got to say something. But was this enough for the MVP? Does Mr. Sol accept the apology?
She's got nothing critical to say about him.
I accepted his apology. All I said, I appreciated his cause. I appreciated that it came from him, and that's pretty much what I said.
So he appreciates it, but he is calling on the Premier to make a public apology to all Indigenous people. And so is that necessary? I mean, is this politics at play? Mamako says, but he does say something I think pretty strong. He states that racism and oppression is alive and well in
They're telling us we're not family. She just reinforced
I agree with that. I mean, we will talk about that. And Ford's been called a racist for this comment. I mean, is he? No, I don't think that's fair. It was certainly stupid, politically speaking.
I don't think it's really, because how many racial slurs has he spit against us in the last 6 months? That's 3.
He didn't need to say that. It was an unnecessary cheap shot that turned into a self-inflicted wound. But to suggest that he's racist or that racism and oppression is alive and well in Queen's Park. I think that's
when these white women go,
a little overstated, but we'll talk about that later in the show. But bottom line, if the premier was going to make that kind of accusation, he would have had to have known, you got to show your work, or you apologize. And so now that has happened. We got a very busy show tonight. A little bit later, we're going to talk about that 4-month delay in vaccine doses, because there's been a lot of debate about whether it's based on science or politics, and now we've got the answer.
Another white person saying that a white person is racist.
Well,
we aren't allowed to determine who our family is. They are.
So we'll talk
they
about
tell
that
us
in
who
7 o'clock
family
hour.
is.
And do teachers
Every
deserve
politician
a
around the
raise?
world's getting the shot first to
New
show their
polling
people it's
suggests
safe. But as soon as we
Canadians
do it,
say a resounding.
you see, you do exactly what they tell you they want you to do to mimic them, and they still come down.
We'll get into that in a bit more detail later. Coming up next, the Ford government coming out late today saying, look, we don't have enough vaccines to meet demand. And so they're asking the Trudeau government to give them more reliability. And we can't get that reliability because guess what? Oh, yeah, we don't make vaccines here, and we're relying on everybody else. So we don't have nearly enough to get ahead of this third wave.
Go for higher education, borrow the money, and get a service
when they were
job.
locking down, the next day we're opening up, and now we're being told we're locking down, and left hand, right hand. Like, what is the game plan? Someone's got to explain. We'll talk about that next. Stay with us here. Very busy.
No, I don't think we will. You've shown your pathology.
No matter
and they do that on purpose to get people to call in and email in so they can show the advertisers, look how many verified listeners we have.
And you don't know what the problem is. And to the best of my knowledge, he has not exhibited that he knows exactly what is African football's problem. I hope he will have a different view as soon as he takes office.
Do you think
economists have been trying to figure it out, and they've come up with a few reasons. Here are two big important ones. For one thing, the Federal Reserve, America's central bank, has created trillions and trillions of new dollars to keep interest rates down.
That's not what the problem is.
And reason number two is what people are talking about right now. Inflation. Inflation and interest rates are very closely linked, because when investors expect inflation, they demand higher interest rates to make up for it. And over the last decade, inflation stayed really low. That's basically been our get-out-of-jail-free card.
Really? Because you don't count utilities, gas,
this
groceries,
decade of low
and
interest rates and low inflation helped push Congress towards massive spending bills last year to fight the pandemic.
Many of the economists who were warning about the debt and deficit a decade ago, this time around said if you need to spend $5 trillion.
Narendra Modi would want to bring
prices
Nirav
go up
Modi
because
back.
there's more
He would
money.
want to make sure that Nirav Modi faces the charges. He could actually use this for the 2024 elections as well. So this is a big deal even for the Prime Minister of India.
The base root of all of it doesn't go up.
Gagan Sabharwal, BBC South Asia diaspora reporter on the rise and fall of diamond merchant Nirav Modi. And another dance story. A Russian ballerina has captured attention.
Intervene if he thinks that the Confederation can't sort out its own issues?
I don't think that intervention is what's wrong here, but I do think intervention without transparency is very wrong. I think if Infantino had these conversations a little bit more publicly, I think that people would understand, okay, FIFA is a guide here in making football better for all, so this is what their job is. But if they're not doing it in a transparent manner, of course, everybody's minds will go to the same old
The other thing is they'll say they'll run a bunch of shit like that so that we won't
Free products. It's never been easier to reset your rest because now their winter sale is here and you can save up to 15% on supremely comfortable mattresses and super soft sheets to make your year. Only Casper mattresses are made with up to 86 supportive gel pods to align your spine and eliminate aches and pains. Shop the winter sale today and enjoy up to 15% off your bedroom essentials. Casper, the official sleep partner of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Exclusions may apply. See casper.ca/promo for details and end date.
We are Toronto's news talk leader.
Let's run that past the test audience. Didn't anybody giggle?
To the Grand Confessor, seeking absolution.
To the tune of $28.6 billion. Amanda Cohen is chef and owner of the New York City restaurant Dirt Candy. She's also a co-founder of the coalition, and she joins us now from New York.
You're going to have stupid things to say, too.
of the crop and how many rows of corn are on each cob. Anyone who needs a particular variety can get seeds directly from the farmer rather than buying them commercially. That's making it easier for farmers to diversify strains.
Around here, for example, the black, the red, and the spotted corn have started to disappear. They're not being grown as much. We want to revive these types of corn and reintegrate them back into farming.
Well, everybody's farm is to scatter some of the seeds.
The idea of registering each corn cob exactly is designed to encourage the farmers to grow local varieties, rather than buying industrially produced seeds. This corn was grown by Eugenio Gomez. He's one of the local farmers. On his land, or milpa, as the fields are known here, he grows pumpkins, beans, and above all, maize.
Here I have yellow corn. There are 14 rows of that. I like to grow lots of different colors. I have 4 here altogether. White, yellow, black, and red corn.
Stays on W or stream the entire season now.
By the indigenous peoples of Mexico thousands of years ago. Despite the many alternatives available these days, most farmers here prefer to use seeds from the region. Meanwhile, Lucelia Enriquez from DAI has arrived in the village of Cardenas.
Remember, it says, was that necessary? It's not just, is it necessary for the Premier to apologize?
Gender roles are
He's saying, was it necessary for us to point out that you're being
so
racist?
it's much easier for the women here to trust another woman.
It's genocide.
And so we work together.
60 scoop and all that.
Lucelia and the women from the village have completed a very unusual project. They produced their own cookbook, full of their own recipes, complete with photos.
We did the book to encourage women to use the produce they grow in their gardens. And of course, we wanted them to be proud of their recipes.
Each woman was asked to contribute her favorite recipe, describing exactly how she prepares it and which local ingredients she uses. The book was given out for free in the village. It can also be downloaded online. In the evening, the women present a small selection of their dishes. They each show what they've been cooking today.
Tell us your name. Consuelo Ruiz. Today I made a chicken hot pot.
Made from chickens that were running around the village this morning.
Oh, yeah.
Then there's atole de granillo, a local drink made from corn. None of the women here ever dreamed that they and their recipes would one day be featured in a book. Working with the NGO has helped them realize that their recipes made from local produce aren't just unique, but even a key to greater food security. And it's also helped many women here to understand the importance of their role, so that they can be proud of the work that they do each day.
Strong women changing the world as we know it. On our Facebook channel, DW Women, you'll find stories about those taking a stand and inspiring others. DW Women gives a voice to women everywhere. And that's all from us at Global 3000 this week. We're curious to know what you liked about the show, so drop us a line to global3000@dw.com. See you next time.
Hi, my name is Camila. I'm 5. I live in Cairo, Egypt. Today I'm going to show you my name down.
Alex Rodriguez, a call to author to your engagement.
Fuck, so you're serious.
To be hanging on to second doses. So that's not what's happening in Ontario. What's happening in Ontario is slow, negligent distribution of the limited doses that they do have. That's not to take the heat off the federal government for having too few doses. but it's to give some additional heat to Queen's Park for being slow about moving the doses they receive into people's arms.
Yeah, and today the Prime Minister coming out and, talking about, well, we've got 1 million doses of Pfizer coming in the week of March 22nd to May 10th, and people will think that that's wonderful, but it's not a lot. It's certainly not going to get us ahead of this third wave that the epidemiologists are saying it's like coming right at us. The spread of variants is now at 40%. And so we're getting excited about vaccines that in no way, because we're not Israel, we're not the United States, we are not vaccinating nearly fast enough.
No, we're not.
It's up to those two, eh?
What worries me, especially right now, is Ontario. Because of all the large provinces in the country, two things are true. Number one, it's in dead last place for delivering the vaccines that it receives. And number two, it has the fastest growing epidemic of any of the large provinces. Put those two together and it does not spell a bright future. I know the Premier wants the province open. He said it again and again, and he's dropped restrictions. That is not the correct thing to do right now, because it is already causing the epidemic to resurge, and it points directly to a third wave.
Yeah, the headline today in Brampton is that they've shut down the Amazon plant, and now thousands are in isolation. So there's a real confusion because they are opening up, and frankly, I'm at the point where, people are so frustrated here in Toronto because we've been locked down so long and watching, we're all doing our part, Professor, but the cases are really not coming down anymore.
Tell the people that aren't
are just
from
kind of saying, we give up.
About 50% of the people here aren't from here.
And yet we're opening up and being warned that we're shutting down. So the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing.
Of course. Look, all of this is right, and not everybody is as fortunate as I am or my family is, where we have jobs that we can work from home. So believe me, I get it. This is miserable on people.
All these people, they're daydream fantasy all day long when they're at work. It's being able to stay home and do what they want.
Foolishness of provincial and federal governments
complaining, the ones with jobs paying them
doses of vaccine quickly enough to people, even with the limited number of doses they've got. My God, the fact that a third of them are sitting in a fridge or a freezer in Ontario, I don't have words for this. That simply should not be the case.
And now Johnson & Johnson, it's been approved, but we don't know when that's coming. AstraZeneca, there are countries, as you know, well known in Europe, saying that they're not going to give it, but the Health Canada has signed off on it. Do you have any concerns about this?
Of course not.
Look, the big concern is the numbers. I'm happy with any of the vaccines that are out there. The ones you mentioned, AstraZeneca, Johnson & Johnson, then there's Pfizer, then there's Moderna. These are the approved vaccines. They're all excellent. There isn't a single reason to insist on receiving one or the other. They're great.
Really, because the government says that if you're over a certain age, you're not supposed to get one.
Every hour of sleep with Casper supremely comfortable mattresses, sheets, and pillows. Setting yourself up for better rest has never been easier. Casper's
mad commercials right there. You don't want to tell us what's really that. That's when I know something's going on, because they're not telling us nothing.
Mattresses are made with up to 86 supportive gel pods to align your spine and eliminate aches and pains. Casper is also the official sleep partner of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Shop the daylight savings sale and enjoy up to 15% off your bedroom essentials at Casper.ca. Exclusions may apply. See Casper.ca/promo for details and end date.
During extreme weather season, count on our Weather Express and the 680 News Extreme Weather Center for all the latest on the storm.
And how to keep you and your family safe.
Road conditions, school cancellations, and the latest storm updates.
The 680 News Extreme Weather Center has you covered.
Brought to you by Subaru. Confidence in motion.
On your radio, online, and on your smart speaker.
This is 680 News.
A plea for patience from Ontario doctors as they get ready to join the province's vaccine rollout this weekend. Ontario Medical Association President Dr. Samantha Hill says patients in those regions should not call their doctors to book an appointment because physicians will call eligible patients directly.
Sure they will.
Don't need to contact their physicians at this point. In fact, doing so will just delay people's access to care.
Oh, of course it will.
Physicians will have access
So using the phone ties up the phone that the 911 might need it or some shit.
The province announced this week that some family doctors here in Toronto, as well as Peel Region, Hamilton,
even your tap dripping is what ruined the water system in Texas.
Will be administering the AstraZeneca shot. Business is next.
So every fucking story is about vaccines.
Things with just one casino chip. Discover a world of incredible casino games with over 500 high-quality online slot games, including the world-renowned progressive jackpot slot, Mega Moolah. Play for free at jackpotcity.net and get treated as a VIP 24/7. So visit jackpotcity.net today on your tablet, laptop, or mobile.
Something's gonna come up.
Jackpot City, a whole world of casino games. 18+. Please play responsibly.